about her. She returns transmigrating consciousness to its source, but it has to think, I want to go home. See, I want to put that in a simple way. Sri Ramakrishna said, you know, you can't get the red toy away from the kid, right? It'll cry if you do, but it'll throw it away itself when it sees its mother. See? So Sri Ramakrishna is trying to explain high philosophy in the simplest of terms to the human soul that's in this predicament of the 6 transformations and Maya and so forth. The loss of remembrance of itself, of all things. The last thing it would want when it came here, which would be to forget its home. So she returns transmigrating consciousness to its source. As she does so, you have to know, she strips name and form away from nature. So Namarupa are the first 2 aspects of Maya. Then you have Desha Kala. So you've got name form, then you've got time and space. And finally you've got this actions we're doing, you know, cause and effect. Constant repetition of actions all the time. And piling up something from that, some residue from acting. Because at the end of each day you're supposed to neutralize all that and start over. You know, live in the day, live in the moment. I think living in the eternal moment starts with just taking it a day at a time. If you can't take it a moment at a time, or an hour at a time, or a breath at a time, which we'll teach you next week. I'll show you it this time on the new chart, and then we'll practice it a little bit next week at the retreat. How to take a Vedic breath is much different than a Hatha Yoga breath. So much different, with so many more connections, and such fruit comes out of it. If you do a breathing as a Hatha Yogi, there's no benefit except for the body. The Upanishad says that's nigarbha, you know, nothing in your breath. But if you do it sagarbha with a mantra and with all the connections that the Vedas and the Tantras and the Ashtanga Yoga is telling you about, it's 100 times more effective. It'll bring you 100 times more benefit if you breathe that way. It's called a Vedic breath. That's the breath of life we're looking at, wanting to take, and that's what's going to make you a living entity instead of a walking dead. See, there's a reason why Walking Dead got a hold of everyone's consciousness in America. So now we want to be breathing and living, and each breath is her, even though it has 3 and we become aware of the 3 movements. I'm getting too far ahead into the retreat next week, but we will brook on it today when I show you that chart. And I wanted to read you this sloka about this tip of a hair divided into thousands of times, and how that subtlety is realized by the seers and the rishis and the gods. So the gods and goddesses are all inside of you see, and you're inside the Atman. Atman's inside of Brahman, and so forth. Om Nyacha Tam Nyachat Mani Nyacha Budao Intelligence Diyam Yacha Cha Buddhi Sakshini. Your buddhi, your intelligence, has to become a witness of everything, not a participant, a witness. You've participated in too many things. You have never learned the art of withdrawing from them. So now you are the things themselves, and you suffer the effects of the things. And that's where suffering comes from, desires for things and so forth. That's an old teaching. But we want the new solution. So now we're going to withdraw everything back, and that's what the breath is when you withdraw it. When you take everything in, you're revealing all your knowledge, right? When everything's gone, then she stands forth, right? Just like the vision of the rishi. You have to get rid of everything, then she's standing there. Where have you been, my son? Ask me a boon. So then when you hold the breath, you're holding all your own knowledge, and you know it. Then when you expel it, you see, you're renouncing it all. See, so each motion of the breath, taught by the Vedic breath in the Upanishad, has that kind of deep significance with it, and it all culminates in Kumbhaka. Kumbhaka is a no breath. So you have twice in every breath where you're not taking in air or expelling air, right? It's called Kumbhaka. You breathe in, you hold. You breathe out, you hold. So that's the Kumbhaka in practice. But the Kumbhaka yoga is different. That's the breathless state. The Rishi doesn't breathe anymore. The three motions of his breath are just the attainment of knowledge, the realization of knowledge, and the giving up of everything else. And that's called Kumbhaka yoga. His lungs and body still may be moving, but he's not breathing anymore. And it's the same with birth, life, and death. They're not born, they don't live, and they don't die. They're living in one state, an indivisible state of pure conscious awareness. So we will look at that more, not only today, but next week at the retreat in depth. So, as I was saying, we moved our way up to Sloka 8, where that word ruchira came to us. Let's look at a few of the teachings that are aligned with these. So basically, I'll just read it, the first slokas to you. We study these if you remember them. So basically it's the wise, having studied the Shastras, that's the scriptures, and reflected on them again and again, have come to know Brahman. So you use the scriptures to come to know Brahman. As I just chanted at the beginning of this class, Vedanta Siddhanta Niruktiresha. Vedanta declares that all is Brahman, and you come to know that by the proof of the scriptures, Shruti. You hear those, you become convinced of it, and then you can go beyond the scriptures. And he hints here at something in our future. Should abandon them as a firebrand. If those of you who are studying Gaudapada's Karika on the Mandukya Upanishad know that he has a section called the Firebrand. As you're outside at night, and you're twisting a sparkler or something or a firebrand around, you see it's leaving what we used to call a tracer in the 60s. And it's not actually there. Your eyes are very slow in picking up on that. So it's a mirage. It's an illusion that's happening right there in front of you by your own motion. So that's what karma and life and cycles and all that is all about too. It leaves effects behind that are mirages that you get convinced are real when they're not real. You're the only reality. So you've sort of lost remembrance of the controller and fallen into the image of the controlled. You're now the controlled. And so in that way, then it mentions it right off the bat in the first sloka of the Amrita-Nada Upanishad. Then it says, if you remember, ascend the vehicle of Om with the higher self as your charioteer, and go to the seat of Brahmaloka and worship Rudra. You should go in that chariot as long as you need it. Then abandoning that vehicle as well, you'll reach the abode of the Lord of the vehicles. That's a little bit esoteric, but basically they're talking about Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, the Trinity, and the Word that's behind them. In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. That Word that Jesus talked about is now represented by Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. It's spelled A-U-M. So A is Brahma, U is Vishnu, M is Shiva. So it's also A is birth, U is life, M is death. It's also A is the waking state, U is the dreaming state, M is the deep sleep state. And now you're getting close to Advaita Vedanta. Because there's this little one-eyed smile there, you see, that's not connected with the, looks like a three-figure, the Om, right? You've seen it hanging on the walls in stores, selling banners and stuff. I saw it painted on a rock with white spray paint in downtown New York in the park. What's that park called?
Central Park.
Central Park. There it was, an Om sign in the 70s, painted on a big rock with a spray paint can. So people were into it. They said, oh, this is cool. But they didn't know what it meant. And they weren't connecting it in their consciousness. And they weren't meditating on it. And they weren't taking it as a vehicle to the Trinity and finding out what life, birth, and death is all about. Basically, that it's an illusion, that you're an eternal soul. Your body gets born, your body lives, your body dies. That's even questionable. You can even disprove that philosophically if you want. Because your form still proceeds to wherever you're going. Heaven, you still got your body. It's just in a subtle form now. So nothing ever dies. Nothing's ever born. It exists all the time. What really happens is whether it's manifested or not. That's what we're getting confused about. When it's manifested, she's playing. And when it's unmanifested, she's not anymore. She withdrew everything. She told Shiva, dissolve that, I'm tired of it. And all souls went back to her, you see. So I started out saying Vedanta was the voice of freedom, and it told you that you're not a sinner at all. It's the worst sin to call another a sinner, Vivekananda said when he came here and saw what fundamentalist religion was perpetrating on people. It's the worst sin to call another sinner. You're the immortal soul. You're God walking around on two legs. Where else are you going to find God, if not here in people? Of course, it's going to be a far cry on the Kali Yuga to find it there, because it's not either male or female. It's even when she's here, she's a flowing entity. I mean, where can you assign the gender to her? So, yeah, I'm getting too much into commentary on slokas we've already supposed to have studied. Number 4, having given up Mata, Linga, and Pada, after knowing them, these are the portions of the word, like AUM I was just explaining to you, should attain the subtlest seat, free of vowels and consonants by means of the letter M, with the shvara, the accent. So you get beyond AUM, everything gets dissolved. You understand what the matras and the padas, the words and everything mean. Because padas for us means a bunch of garbage we're talking about every day. But padas have Divine Mother energy in them, so you go to a higher aspect of the word. And you can't hear me? Is that the thing? Yeah, I'll try and speak louder. I know you can't come close because of our distancing. My voice isn't all that strong, but I'll try not to raise and fall so much and keep it even. So beyond the M then is this shvara. And that's that one-eyed smile, I like to call it, when you saw it on the Om sign. And that's the fourth or transcendent reality. So that gets beyond AUM, so you can imagine well that it would get beyond waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. It would get beyond the Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, which they're trying to explain to you here. And that you would arrive at this state they call Samadhi in Vedanta. They call Asampragyata in yoga, they call Satori in Zen, they call Nirvana in Buddhism. Wherever you see it, there's a state of the beyond the threes, you see, and definitely beyond the twos, like pleasure and pain, life and death, so forth. And that's what they're talking about in this sloka. The accent now is the shvara, that is the fourth. It's not connected to the three matras of Om anymore. It's beyond the word. So that's why I said, you'll want to take the scriptures and study them with a teacher, and then know Brahman through that teaching, and then you can go beyond the scriptures and give it up, just like you'd give up the illusion of a Firebrand's tracer. You see, oh, that's not really real. It's hypnotizing me. So these are the metaphors and similes they're using to try and explain the inexplicable. And then finally gets into what we want to start studying today, pratyahara. Pratyahara, if you know your Ashtanga yoga, then you know that it's the fifth limb of yoga. you do the yamas and niyamas. There are 5 of each of those, like ahimsa, nonviolence, and truthfulness. And all these are the kind of moral side of yoga, although I think it goes deeper than that. And then you get to asana, where you can sit like this. And we'll look at Vedic asana later too. It's much different than hatha asana. So you want to get to one position to sit in. Like Buddha sat in this position for 49 days. Finally pierced through Maya, we call Mara, and reached nirvana. So you want to be able to sit and leave the body alone, leave the body out of it. It's not a matter of how many positions can I get into, and my mind is thinking about that all the time. It's a matter of get my body into one position so I don't have to think about it anymore. It goes in a completely different direction than Western society is taking yoga today. And that's towards enlightenment, not toward materialism and body orientation and sensuality and all the things that are giving us suffering, obviously. You want to leave off, not accumulate, right? As we've been talking about lately. So then you have breathing, 4th limb, pranayama. Then you have this pratyahara. So all of a sudden they start you out right at pratyahara in this Upanishad. It's like, oh, you already know those things, you see. Don't you? Well, no, we don't, as a Western society, obviously, and we're actually taking some of them in the wrong direction. So you should get a teacher and know about Sadanga yoga. They just trimmed off, conveniently, a bunch of limbs for you in the Upanishads, and Patanjali brought them back later because people had fallen from the ideal. So he brought back things like asana and breathing exercise, but in the old days you really didn't need that. You just started off with ruchira, your shining mind. And you were born aware of yourself. That's called Satya Yuga living or Treta Yuga living. So basically you want to have that pure mind that these great souls arrive on earth with. Like I saw in my teacher there on the mantle, Swami Asheshanandaji, who taught right here in this city for 40 or 50 years. And I went to him, because I was born across the river over there, you see. So I came very close to him when I incarnated in the body. My aim was pretty good. But I didn't know him for 20 years, growing up in school across there in the Southwest. And he was over here, you see, teaching at the Vedanta Society. So I came then after about my 20th year and found him. So you want a teacher like that has arrived on the earth in knowledge of who he, she is, you see, already. It's not something, spirituality isn't a matter of growth. Growth is one of the transformations. And we think that this is a new lifetime, we only believe in one lifetime, and we have to go to school, and we have to learn things that we already know, and then we have to do that over and over again. You see, I already learned that last lifetime. That's why I'm so bored with it. That's why my kids aren't wanting to go to school. Just the eternal money making going on behind it. Vivekananda says, I want something new and fresh, you see. I want to live an enlightened lifetime. See, the Buddhists say, you've got 3 chances, you see. If you want to get enlightenment, you're probably going to have 3 more incarnations to do it. That's at least one school of Buddhism says that, you see. So that's, the first one of those is, you wake up, you see. I am Atma Brahma. The self is Brahman. I am not that, you see, all of that out there. I'm all of this in here, you see. And I'll sort through it and I'll find my true nature. So that's your first lifetime. You die conscious, is what that is, really. You hear the truth, and even if you haven't fully realized it yet, because you probably haven't, you take it to your grave. Ha. You see, my teacher used to say that. From the cradle to the grave, man is bound. So you hear of your birthless, deathless nature, and you let your body go at the end of that lifetime, and then you live a lifetime that gets rid of all the rest of the karma. You live a lifetime of practice. You're a practitioner. And that's where this starts off, study the scriptures that tell you, again, that you're the true nature, and have your teacher clarify that for you and practice it. That's called sadhana. I was in Ashland, Oregon when I drove here, up, bringing all the San Francisco things from the closed ashram up here a couple days ago. And came through Ashland, standing in front of this store, looking at this sign. There's a little sign with all these things. Oh, we are happy in this family. We serve good food. There's a whole list of this plaque they want you to buy in the window, you see. But I looked through the whole thing, 10 things, and not one thing said, we practice sadhana here. See? We seek enlightenment. There's no mention of that in the minds of the worldly. As if that doesn't, we don't want that. We just want this mundane life that ends in death with no higher knowledge in it. So what happened to our desire for enlightenment? Or was it ever here? Are we really just learning it anew? Or are we just relearning all the old things that keep us from it? As I said, the goddess appeared. When she left, she took all the delusion away. And the rishi sat down and he wrote five things, basically. This is what happened when she left. I realized that this was a delusion, this was a delusion, this was a delusion, and it's called the 5 delusions in the Upanishad. I have a chart on it, of course. I sat down myself, because the rishi had sat down and wrote it down. I sat down and wrote it down and put a chart out on it. Things like, Brahman is the source of everything. You're always one with Brahman. You're never the body-mind mechanism. So that we've fallen into the idea that we are a body-mind mechanism is a delusion in Vedanta. It's a false superimposition. And it keeps us from realizing our true nature. That ruchira that's shining from our eyes, you see, from enlightened minds. Siras, another word for manas. Siras is that mind that got shining instead of just dual. You see, got all heavy and everything by too many dualities, right? Had too much pleasure, then it had pain coming from it, and so it got jaded. You see, it heavy, couldn't lift itself up anymore, lost all its hot air, all its helium, couldn't go up anymore, like Sri Ramakrishna said. No buoyancy in the air balloon anymore. See. So when you say siras or you say ruchira, you say some mind that's shining somewhere and remains in an elevated, buoyant condition naturally. It's not even having to work to do that anymore. Like when we work to do it, we're trying to get rid of tamas and rajas to get to sattva, right? That's the teaching prevalent in Samkhya and Vedanta and Yoga. Get beyond the 3 gunas, where she is, or get to sattva guna at least. That takes effort. We have to watch ourselves, observe our minds. It's all happening in the mind, at least we know that much. The physical doesn't have much to do with it anymore. If you balance the mind, the physical will become balanced. It won't happen the other way. You can't get to the infinite through the finite. You have to transcend the finite. Try to get to Brahman through its Maya. Come on. Maya's far outstripping everything it runs all the time, and deluding everyone. Even the most wise get deluded by Maya. So Sri Ramakrishna said, oh, that's the Maya over there. You see, that's the poison in the snake. That's the Maya in Brahman. So just, salute that from a distance. Like he used to say, yes, everything's Brahman. Somebody came up to him, is everything Brahman, Master? Yes, everything is Brahman. So the tiger is Brahman? He was talking about violence and everything. Yes, the tiger is Brahman, but you don't want to hug the tiger Brahman. You want to hug, the formless Brahman. So Brahman has turned into all this, names and forms. That's due to its Maya. And then, you're going to have, it filtered everything that was beneficial and detrimental. Because there are some things beneficial here and some things detrimental. It filtered it. Maya did that for you. Now you have to refilter Maya to see through it. But it'd be much better for you if you could just withdraw from it and see it as an illusion, like the Rishi did when he saw the mother. Just see the 5 delusions. See her, get rid of all delusion, and be free. Pass your time contentedly and be free. Shankara says in his scripture. How are you going to do that? By taking what's outward and what's inward, and it seems to be 2, right? But you render them into one thing. What's out there is also in here. Sri Ramakrishna used to do that, you see. You've seen this, one of his pictures, you see? What's inside is also outside. What's outside is also inside. From the inside, the outside has come. From the infinite, the finite has come. But since it finite came from the infinite, it too is infinite. You must have noticed. Infinite trees, infinite lakes, infinite mountains, infinite trees, forests. So it's all one thing, basically, and you have to quit seeing it as 2. There's 2 eyes and 2 nostrils and 2 ears, 2 other things. And you want to see it all as one. Or not 2, might be a better way of saying it. So, if you can do this, it's true pratyahara. So the Upanishad says, this is called pratyahara when one can merely think the 5 objects of the senses and control the unsteady mind by the reins of the Atman. That's pratyahara. I was talking right here in this room yesterday with a student who said, pratyahara to me is everything that keeps me from dharana. If I jump to dharana, which is the 6th limb of yoga, it means concentration. If you can concentrate, you're already free. But people can't. Concentration means unbroken. You see, it's like you reach a state where your mind's not fragmented anymore, where it doesn't have spikes and valleys, where it's just flatlined. You're dead, you see. In the hospital of spirituality, you're flatlined. You don't think about things good and bad anymore, because that's falling into the dualities of Maya. You just prefer to be even. It's called tulya smriti. I remember that I'm equal at all times. Tulya smriti. I'm in a state of equanimity all the time. Why is my mind vacillating out of that? And having joy and sorrow, happiness and grief and so forth. Or can I just stay in one state? Ekagra, it's called in yoga. Eka, one. Ekagra, one mind, one steady mind. So the student was sitting here telling me, if I just keep my concentration, dharana, if anything impedes upon it, then I look back, that's because that's going to need the practice of pratyahara. Otherwise I don't need it. So pratyahara is shown up by the lack of concentration in the mind. And you have to then look at what got you out of concentration and do away with it. So many things can mess with your concentration, as you know. But you're going to have to learn that art of full concentration in order to get to Samadhi, which is then the next limb. Well, meditation, to get true meditation. So this is how quick and how deep you're taking in the ocean waters of the Upanishads. Within 5 slokas, that's where you are. I was thinking of the breath, right? The breathing exercise. So everyone from a newborn baby to a maturing athlete to a wheezing old man is gasping for breath, you see. So breath is life to them. But the breathless state is true life to the yogi. He's not a pair of lungs anymore. He's not looking for his next breath. And if it happens, it's just the acknowledgement of everything that is. And when he lets it out, it's the giving away of everything that's not. Krishna says that in the Gita. Uma sat na vidyate bhavo na bhavo vidyate sattaha. The unreal doesn't exist. And the real never ceases to exist. So the real is always there, and you're mistaking it for the unreal. It's a charade. It's a wool pulled over your eyes game because you're buying into Maya and delusion of the mind through desires and then nada granti karma samskara. Your nadis get blocked up and you can't see right, you can't think right, you can't hear right. Hey, what's that you say again? Can't hear right unless the speaker speaks up. So you got to open these nadis and live. Live as a yogi or a yogini. You know. Namaste Mahayogini, the scriptures say. I salute the mother of all yogis and yoginis. She has under her control thousands and thousands of female ascetics, you know, Upanishad says. And there's their mantra. Om, Hrim, Saum, Kling, Annapurna, Bhagavat Jai, Svaha. It's got, you know, I think 27, 28 different syllables to it. I'll share it with you next weekend. So this covers in a deeper way and quicker these slokas we looked at last time I was here. So pratyahara is that which, if you have it, then you can merely think of the five senses and the five objects. And that's all it's needed to operate them. Your Atman is operating mind, which is operating the senses, not the ego operating mind, operating the senses. If I may add that. Sloka 6, pranayama, control of the breath. Pratyahara, subjugation of the senses. You remember I created this for this Upanishad, I created this class, this chart. So that's Sloka 6. Pranayama, control of the breath. Pratyahara, subjugation of the senses. Tarka, reasoning would be dharana, concentration, dhyan, samadhi, dhyan, meditation, and samadhi, a beatific vision or higher non-dual experience. So this is Ashtanga Yoga here. So notice how, if you were studying other systems, you might be looking at, 12 other things before you got here. 5 yamas, 5 niyamas, asana, and breathing. But this starts you off with breathing and takes you right to pratyahara. Just to refresh your mind, let's go through it at breakneck speed with higher volume. So there you have it there. Start with pranayama, the bottom limb. This tree is in Oahu in Hawaii, in a park. Stains adhering to the organs are burnt away by animating the prana, like minerals are purified by intense heat. Let's see, where is that? Just as the impurities of mountain minerals are burnt away by the fire blower, so the stains committed by the organs are burned by awakening and animating the prana. So what is it that Vivekananda said when he got here to the West? Oh, I see you don't know anything about prana anymore, nor do you know about tanmatras. Well, prana is, man does not live by bread alone, is the closest thing we've heard. But they haven't interpreted that for us in a way that India did. So prana is that life force by which you breathe in, hold, and breathe out. And it has all these other connections too. There's a psychic prana that if you went beyond just the 5 pranas of in-breath, out-breath, breathing and excreting of your food and the all-pervasive prana that's in everything. There are 5 different pranas on the physical level, which they teach. But if you went beyond that, then you'd find the sources to those 5 are inside, from the outside to the inside, right? So you always have to be looking in the right direction. Science is looking up. Psychology is looking, historians are looking back. but nobody's looking in like they were told to by Jesus. So you should always take that inner direction towards your true self, towards the mother of the true self, and then take notes along the way. Otherwise you get stuck with the objects and the senses, and you can't even get pratyahara. You see, you won't even be able to start out right. You won't have pranayama flowing, so you can't reason correctly. So therefore you can't really attain pratyahara in order to concentrate properly. There are people who attained pratyahara and gave up all this outside, but they didn't give up what caused it. So they're fakes. They're immature yogis. They're false renunciates, because they gave up everything out here, but they never saw the source to everything inside. So they're still thinking in their mind. Air, earth, water, fire, ether, tasting, touching, hearing, smelling, seeing, coming, going, excreting, emptying. You know, it's still their thoughts. They haven't renounced their thoughts. You know, that's why you sit in meditation, right? To empty your thoughts. I mean, basically that idea got through to the West, right? Oh, let's go on a meditation retreat. Okay, now I don't want you to think. You see, don't think now. Oh, that's going to be hard, you see. So it's going to take a whole different ability to stop the mind from vibrating. Yoga chitta vritti nirodha. Chitta vrittis are thoughts. They're aklista, negative thoughts, and they're klista, positive thoughts. Father of yoga tells us. So we're going to have to go beyond both. Say Om Tat Sat Om. So that's going to be a tall order for most people, but if you can do it outside, then you take it inward by degrees. And at some time, Holy Mother said, you'll get that ability to have a perfect meditation. Just, you have to keep practicing every day, that's all. The only thing she wanted you to do is just keep practicing every day and do the japa, do the mantra practice. We'll study that really well. Maybe we'll get to it at the second half. So not hanging out a long time on this, control of breath would be there, and then, because this is the Ashtanga Yoga, so here's Tarka. What it says about Tarka is, via Tarka, all becomes equal, so long as such inference does not conflict with the Vedas. So you have to take these scriptures, as long as you don't know Brahman yet, you take these scriptures as the word. And you take your guru as the explicator of these scriptures. And then going on like that, you come to know by degrees, your ignorance thins out. And one day you wake up and your ignorance is gone due to constant practice. So Tarka isn't there in the Ashtanga Yoga, is it? The closest thing you would see in it would be called Svadhyaya. That's one of the niyamas in Ashtanga Yoga. So Sadanga Yoga is proposing it be accented, like the father of yoga did with Kriya Yoga. See, Kriya Yoga, you're going to have Svadhyaya as a major part of your practice, looking into the scriptures and reasoning about them. Don't just read a book and put it down, but you have to sit with them, because the mother power is in the words, and you have to sort of, extract her out from hiding. See, what's the word really mean? That's why if you look into Sanskrit, you'll find there's some really deep meanings in those words. And that's in long words, but the shorter Sanskrit words become, they turn into seeds. They're called bijams, sukshma bija. So the real words are subtle. The word creation, for instance, is a subtle word, shrishti. So if you say shrishti, that's a word in Lord Brahma's head. Oh, you want me to start creating again? Okay, here it goes. And a whole cycle begins. But then he hears the word laya. Oh, you want me to stop? Okay, I better stop. So everything dissolves and nothing moves anymore. Everything goes back to its quiet, peaceful state. Shrishti, sthiti, and laya. So those are like bijams. Words start everything rolling, and words end everything. Words are vibrations. And the words that are most powerful are in here. They say the best way to do the mantra is inaudible. Second best, mutter it. Worst, outside. So if you're going down in a plane and it's your last breath, you probably go, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, till you hit the ground. That's all right. That's acceptable, unless you're fearless. But in practice, it's sukshma again. It's very subtle. We can look about that a little bit later too. So tarka, pratyahara. Then we already remember what they're saying about that is that if one can merely think, it means really if you have control of your senses, like eating and drinking and sexual appetites and various things that people are having experiences with, if you can think those things, if you can control those things with your thoughts, then that's what pratyahara amounts to. Especially if you can keep that control and not give it away. But if you can't do that, the senses are like 5 horses, and they're all taking a different road. And there's one chariot called the mind that's being pulled apart into 5 different directions. So you have to keep that control of the mind over the senses. The mind is the 6th sense, they call it, see? And that's where all the deep facilities like the intuition and things like that are lodged in the mind. Emotions too are lodged in the mind, not in the heart. The heart's the Atman. So pratyahara, that is called pratyahara when mere thinking of the mind and senses using pure prana brings natural detachment. So you just think, like Sri Ramakrishna, say, well, would you like to smoke this pipe? Why, yes. Took 1 puff, that was it. I've done it, take it away, I don't want it. Would you like to wear an expensive cloth? Why, yes. Put on expensive cloth. Threw it away, stamped on it a couple minutes later. Can you do that with your favorite garment? So, would you like to have some gold? Yes. Gave some gold and picked up a clod off the river, looked at the gold, looked at the clod, threw them both in the river. They're just earth to me. So that kind of detachment, that is pratyahara. You know ahead of time that those things aren't going to satisfy you, and they're not really real. They came from your mind. You thought them, and they came. You thought gold, it came. Or if you thought gold in the wrong way, it didn't come, and you think about it for the rest of your lifetimes, you're a miser. So everything has to have a right orientation, but the mind is the chief. The sovereign amongst the senses is the mind. And it's become a petty potentate, as one song in India sings. Because it's taking advice from the senses when it should be giving control over the senses. See, it should be taking control over the senses. But the senses are taking control of it. So the mind has to be chief. Manojaya, the mind, I just chanted that, it says, meditate upon Om with a victorious mind. Mano Jaya. Jaya Manaha is a word. Then cross over the shores of darkness, the ocean of darkness to the shores of enlightenment. Then we have next dharana. You can get then to concentration, the limb of concentration after you've gotten pratyahara. Intense dharana dissolves karmic effects, merges sankalpa into the Atman, renders the body motionless, and establishes the mind in the, quote, hollow stalk. You know what the hollow stalk is? Yeah. Sushumna, your spinal column. See? So that's just a bony structure, but it represents something inside. See? So inside of that, because a lot of nerve endings go through the spinal column too, right? Because you've got a sore neck right now, right? So there's some blockage there. in the physical nerves that are running through the bony structure of the physical spine. So it's sort of like that. You have a subtle spine, hollow stalk, and there's three energies there, three rivers they call them, three sacred rivers, Ida, Pingala, and it wants to reach the Sahasrara, the crown. So there's 7 centers along that spine. It's all Kundalini Yoga teaching. So you want to awaken this energy, and the breath is one way to do this, so that this prana and chit shakti will cause the prana, and the psychic prana too, to flow to higher centers instead of rainwater that's seeking the lowest place, like a swamp. But you want it to rise, like a hot air balloon. You want to breathe it up or think it up. The best way is to think it up. If you have to breathe it up, that's a start. But most people in the West, what do we use breath for? When we're angry, when we're dizzy, when we're swimming. I mean, it's all physical uses, but we don't think of the breath as an eternal principle, and we don't think of it as an inner principle either. Because there's an inward breath, an inward Kumbhaka, and an outward breath that's going on all the time in our mind. Presence of thoughts, suspension of thoughts, dissolution of thoughts, right? That's psychic prana doing the same thing in the subtle mind, subtle body, as the gross prana is doing in our physical body. It's just a different level of consciousness is all. That's why they call it gross, stula, and then subtle, sukshma, and then karana, causeless. And remember there then that dharana does all those things. So once you're concentrated, if you say, well, I met a perfectly concentrated guru like my teacher, then long ago he had dissolved all karma. In fact, his name is Asheshananda, which if Ashesha means residue, or it can mean residue, so it's the bliss of having dissolved all karmic residue is one way of defining his name. He lived right up here on Mount Tabor here, just in back of us all those years, and taught us Vedanta. So Asheshananda, no residue left. So he's living most of his life in a state of no karma, not accumulating anymore and having destroyed all that came from his past lifetime. And merged his sankalpa in the Atman. He didn't say a word that wasn't about Atman. You couldn't talk with him about anything but Brahman. Somebody went up to him once and said, well, my wife and I are thinking of having children. He said, see your doctor. So you just couldn't bring his mind to any other area, whether you thought it was important or not. He was there to talk about Brahman. You were there to learn about Brahman. That was the way it was. And if you didn't go along with it, he would tell you, this is not a social club. Get out of my ashram. There's plenty of places out there where you can do all that. This is just for this one thing. It's for you to get free. We have dedicated it to the Divine Mother so that you can realize her, so she can help you get free. And here's a method, at least one method, Ashtanga Yoga, by which you can do that, or Sadhanga in this case. So before the break here, keep breathing so you can take all this in and have longevity. Let's finish with Samadhi, is it? Have we done 5 already? Samadhi is called Samadhi, in which one knows all things to be equal, as I was saying, Tulya, Smriti. Samadhi opens the path beyond mind, leading to an opening in the crown called moksha. So there's the hollow stalk. As your consciousness rises, you can think you're breathing deeper, you're achieving Kumbhaka, your consciousness is rising to higher states, call it, if you want, mental to intellectual to philosophical to spiritual and beyond. just like the 3 mantras of Om and the Shvara. You see. So as your consciousness rises, Samadhi is going to set in. You cannot keep Samadhi from happening to you. All of us are thinking, oh, I wish I had Samadhi, I wish I had Samadhi. Yeah, you probably don't, not until you're ready. So when naturally Samadhi is coming upon you, you're trying to put on the brakes. I don't know if I want to have that experience yet, you see. So people are real naive about this. They think, oh, I wish I could have Samadhi. Mathur Babu asked Sri Ramakrishna for Samadhi once. And he was in charge of all the things that happened in the temple. So he kept bugging Sri Ramakrishna about that. So Sri Ramakrishna went to Mother Kali and, oh Ma, give him a little. Just give him a little. So nobody saw Mathur for days. She granted Sri Ramakrishna's prayer, and Mathur was gone. When he came back, his hair was all disheveled, his clothes were all messed up. And he said, take it away. I don't want this. I can't do my work. So no, we don't want Samadhi. It will come upon you in a natural way if you just breathe, sit, breathe, control your mind, and prepare yourself for higher levels of awareness with her as your guide. I'll stop there so we can have our break.